Jeni Miles for you, who's going to take you through some material.
Thank you so much. It's great, actually. This is my first time back at Google since I left my job just over a month ago. So thank you so much for giving me a chance to have some more free food. What I'm going to talk to you about today is 3 steps that I've kind of seen as quite a common strategy to really help drive more engaging experiences, create more sort of impactful product design. And throughout this talk, I've also tried to pepper in some neuro-inclusive principles based on my research as well. So as you can see on the slide, I'm an ex-Google Apps Growth consultant, but I'm now doing that in an independent capacity. And I also have, I also have background in behavioural science. So really this talk is about blending my understanding of behavioural science as it pertains to digital products, but also the mobile app, I guess, frameworks for how to deliver more impactful experiences. So I spent 14 years in big tech. It was very hard to leave. Before that, I was at Amazon. I'm a mum of 2, which is probably why I look quite tired. And some of the topics I would talk to some of the top global mobile apps about would include how to find better product market fit, how to monetize sustainably, whether that's through subscriptions, in-app purchases. And then probably you can see where my interest in behavioural science started to form from this job. I realised that in order to improve engagement and retention, it's really about behaviour change. And that's what actually led me to do the Masters at LSE. So 3 steps. This is probably the simplest checklist for behavioural science you've ever seen, because I'm aware that for all the different acronyms and frameworks, sometimes I feel like having just 3 really clear steps to think about as and when you're approaching a behavioural challenge or you're looking at a specific step of a user journey. Let's start with how to make it as simple as possible, how to reduce barriers, how to minimise friction so that the behaviour that you want to happen actually happens. I'll then talk about this concept of triggers. So I think Katie mentioned briefly the BJ Fogg behavioural design model. He talks a lot about the importance of triggers at the right time, prompting people at the right time to take action. And then I've left motivate till the last step because trying to persuade people to do something, trying to boost the motivation is the hardest part of product design. So I would always leave that step last. And I initially was thinking, I'll do a talk about gamification and persuasive design. But I think actually starting with the basics of what makes a behaviour happen in terms of digital products is the best strategy. Right, so I'm going to share now just some examples. But before I do so, who here has seen the UX pyramid before? Is this new to most people? Okay, that's good to know. So really, the point of this UX pyramid is to, as you're ideating as part of this workshop, the key thing is if you really want to have an impactful experience, whether it's for a neurodivergent audience or not, you have to hit the base layers of the pyramid. So first of all, is your product functional? Have you actually done the right quality testing to make sure that there's nothing breaking? Is it reliable, and can people feel like they're going to get what they need from your product or service? If you have the odd error messages, people will leave. And it doesn't matter how great the rest of your app was, they will just bounce. And I'll talk a lot about the mobile app retention challenge, because that was really the goal of my job, to help app developers better retain their users and actually get monetization. But when I think about the usability aspect of this pyramid, before doing this workshop, I thought about usability of, okay, can people achieve a particular task? Can they do it? And then I've realized to be really neuro-inclusive, we have to think about what other meanings, or how do we actually define usability? Usability for a standard user, usability for neurotypical, usability for neurodivergent, and all the different facets of what that actually means for making something usable isn't one baseline layer for everyone. So at its most basic level, when I was looking up more specifics around digital accessibility, it's really using sans serif fonts, concise language, reduced clutter on the screens. And these benefits actually help everyone. We talked about how affordances for a neurodivergent audience actually benefit all of us here. One of the other things that comes up a lot when, again, I was researching neuro-inclusive design as part of this talk was actually offering more than one option, so to really help people choose what's right for them based on their preferences. So, for example, how do they input the information into your tool? Do they use text, or would they actually prefer using voice or some other types of ways of bringing in that information? And similarly, while you might be already making assumptions, my app should have X, Y, Z, actually are there other ways that you could surface that information to the user so that it's as accessible as possible to them. So hopefully you've heard about chunking before. Chunking is really essentially how do you simplify complex tasks, complex journeys, complex information into the most sort of basic units in order to reduce overwhelm. So the most common way that you will all probably have seen this within apps that you use is progress bars. How to actually simplify the journey that might actually be quite complex. Just using progress bars and thinking about breaking it down into smaller steps can really help ensure actual completion rates. And even though the actual number of steps is the same, it's the visual indicators that help make people feel that they're on the right path, that they can do it, and taking it step by step reduces overwhelm, which is beneficial for everyone. And then I'll give you this example from Groove. So this is like a co-working app where essentially you get connected with other freelancers, seeing as I'm now a freelancer, other freelancers, and you kind of work together and share your to-do lists. But what I found really interesting is that they offer the ability, you're not just saying in this 1 hour I'm going to finish this project. I've noticed a lot of my peers that are using the app, they really break it down into small steps. Make tea, check emails. And this includes the neurodivergent audience that I was also working with. So I think thinking about how to split complexity into more simple steps is key. And then redundancy came up again as a really important concept to think about here. So if you look on the right-hand side at this, I guess you call it legend or code, there are 3 different ways that the same symbols can communicate a particular, I guess, factor. So whether it's yes, no, or there's an exclamation, it uses colour, it uses different shapes, and it also uses additional symbols. And while you might think, well, that's actually redundant, why do we need so many different ways of communicating the same information? This is what makes it more accessible to different users overall. So, trigger. This is really, again, about how to prompt people to take action at the right time. So when you're thinking about ideating your app and how it actually looks from a UX standpoint, please don't forget that as an app, you, of course, have the app icon that people tap into if you do choose to use an app. But what I found really interesting by working with so many different PMs or product managers across apps is that the best, most engaging apps, the ones that have the highest retention rates, that have really good user ratings and reviews, they all treat CRM, whether it's push notifications, whether it's email, they treat them as part of the product. And I would encourage you to think about, beyond just the core app screens, what type of in-app messaging push notification messaging can also provide the right value to the user that is tied to your core value proposition. This example is Busu, which is a language learning app. Rather than hit people over the head with a notification of, come back to our app, you've not been here for ages, they're actually thinking, well, what would a useful notification look like to these users? So they use the notification to actually say, well, do you remember what hola means, for example? And that way it brings people back into the app to answer the question, piques their curiosity, but also continues to provide value to both them and the user. 2 other non-app services that I think are sometimes underestimated, again, really about getting the right prompts in front of the user at the right time. I want to share 3 examples, but 2 different surfaces. So lock screen notifications. I would love to hear after if anyone has any examples from their apps that they use, but one of the most famous ones was The Guardian, who during the presidential election way back in 2016, they actually used a persistent lock screen notification so people didn't have to keep going back into the app to find the information they need. Instead, they had live real-time updates where you could obviously, over time, see the red line get further and further towards the middle. And then also the home screen. So the iOS and also Android platforms allow you to have widgets on the home screen that users can decide what's most relevant for me, what's most meaningful for me. A couple of quick examples. This Paku for Purple Air app that I came across recently, they're not really providing much information here. It's very, very simple, visual score and a quick number. So they're not saying, oh, this is how poor quality the air is. That is just really breaking it down to the most simple information. But the most important example that I want to share is Duolingo's dynamic widget. I don't know if anyone has that installed, but essentially it's adaptive. It changes based on how long ago did the person open the app. and are they about to break their streak? And so what happens is the duo character gets progressively angrier over time to kind of motivate you and incentivize you to go back to the app. Obviously, we can have a conversation later about, is appealing to sort of punishing the user the best option? I'm not 100% sure, but they have done a ton of testing. And sorry, the other thing to point out here is 94% of app installs globally won't return to the app 30 days later. So this real engagement challenge is the biggest thing. And wherever you can find ways to have people interact with your app via messages, widgets and so on will help you, because you can probably think about your own examples where you've downloaded something really well motivated and then never actually opened the app again. I'm very guilty of that. And just a couple of other examples of contextual triggers and prompts. So Gmail is really good at anticipating error. And it's debatable what sort of errors might occur with your particular challenge statements. But this one is really about when people do make a mistake and they do something that's not beneficial for them in the product, how can you preempt that and then actually make it easier for the user to then be successful? And I see this a lot because I always forget to attach the file. Okay, so another moment here is in between app screens, in between maybe completing of an activity, how can you use just really small visual or haptic feedback to instill a sense of whether it's well-being, whether it's just time for a break. And so this is a Headspace example. I don't have the animated example here, but essentially the orange just goes in and out to kind of make you feel like you want to breathe in, breathe out, and it's very, very calming. So the last step is motivate. As I said, this is the hardest step, and it's really worth thinking about the first 2 steps before you start trying to put as many game elements within your product as possible. But what I have always found to be the most predictive of successful apps is, are they appealing to core intrinsic needs? Do their features really think about helping people feel competent, feel like they have autonomy, that they're giving meaningful options and freedom to act based on their goals? And really importantly, is there this form of relatedness that they're fostering by connecting them with other users or helping them get support from their friends and social community? You might be thinking about these apps in a silo, but think about who's the support, who are the people that can help your target user actually reach their goals. So one quick example of competence, because I know I'm running out of time. So there's this concept of progressive disclosure, so really deciding at the beginning of the user journey, only showing 1 or 2 of the core features, and over time, then you can start to complicate and show the full feature set once someone has already felt competent and successful within your app. So this is an example from the Fabulous. They actually sort of lock and restrict new users from choosing multiple goals. They pretty much say, first of all, let's just start small. Let's start really simple, and your first goal is to just get into the habit of drinking water every morning. So again, it kind of makes you think of the chunking method as well, of just going back to as simple as possible. Autonomy, so having those meaningful choices. And I think this really goes back to how we said before, neurodivergence isn't just one type of thing. There's different ways that it can manifest. And of course, if you're building a product for everyone as well, everyone will have different preferences. So Asana really thinks about this, and they actually have this multiple views option. So depending on whether you're more text savvy, whether you prefer a more visual indicator of what your projects are, again, it's about this idea of redundancy, having multiple options for multiple users. And I wanted to share this example because I came across it when I was using the Groove app as well. So Flow Club is really about making the use of what we call body doubling, which is doing a task in the presence of someone else. And it's, again, especially helpful for those with ADHD. It helps keep you on track with what you're trying to do, and it just helps to reduce those barriers to actually completing your goals. So I know that was a little bit of a rapid fire into product design and some examples. I'll share the slides with you after, but this is just a high-level checklist of some of the things I talked about today, and feel free to grab me if you have any questions when you're doing the workshop. Great. That's amazing. Thank you so much.